True peace, everybody. It's Queepoo, and I'm back with another video. This video is going to continue from part one of this video, so please go to part one if you wanna, have a better understanding of what this part two is going to be about. So we're just gonna jump right into it and continue. It says the most publicized experiments conducted by MK Ultra involve the administration of LSD on unwitting human subjects, including CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, prostitutes, mentally ill patients, and members of the general public, in order to study their reactions. It says the effects and hazards of LSD. Lysergic acid diethylamide, commonly known as LSD, is an illegal drug that alters the senses and causes hallucinations. It was first synthesized in 1938 by Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann to treat respiratory depression. In 1943, Hofmann accidentally discovered its hallucinogenic properties when he absorbed some through his skin. Over the next 15 years, LSD was used as an anesthetic and to support psychoanalysis. The counterculture of the 1960s led to it being used for recreational purposes. As tales of psychedelic trips, psychotic behavior, and random acts of violence gained media attention, production was stopped in 1967. LSD was banned and classified as a Schedule I drug with no acceptable medical use. Its popularity has decreased since the 1970s. It remains illegal in the United States and elsewhere. Street names include acid, purple haze, dots, and blotter. So here's a child that went through MK Ultra experimentation using LSD and other forms of abuse. So I know it's a little blurry, so I'm going to try to read what it says. So it says, unidentified white female between the age of, 6 and 10 years old. Subject underwent 6 months of treatment using heavy doses of LSD, electroshock, and sensory deprivation experiments under codename MK Ultra about early 60s. Subject's memory was erased and her brain is that of a newborn baby. So now let's look at the introduction to the Nature and Nature Book 1 to look at this from a spiritual standpoint. So it says, listen to reason. There also exists a narcotics god, ether power, similar in mental effect to drugs like crack, cocaine, opium, morphine, heroin, etc. spiritually. And the manifestations of the narcotics god, also called the wine god, are like dope in the sense that ether force causes drowsiness, sleepiness, laziness, and also grand expectations and great ecstasy via the nervous system, but never any real fulfillment in reality. Plus, after the ecstasy, great spiritual joy comes depression like happens after using narcotics as dope and the high wears off. The narcotics god is very impersonal too. The wine narcotic god is sometimes called Bacchus and Dionysus. This god of narcotics and wine are chiefly concerned with giving ecstasy and rapture via ether energy by way of one's nervous systems and brain, and not too concerned with much else. But living active beings need the God in nature who is concerned with all questions and answers problems and solutions that confront us human beings mentally and physically in everyday living, and problems which we flesh and blood beings must deal with successfully if people are ever to live in peace and harmony with each other on planet Earth in the only way possible, which is by conforming to the order and laws of nature in the positive, meant for the decorum and conduct of intelligent people. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. This means that the narcotics god is an ether force that spiritually affects human beings. So even if a person is not physically getting enjoyment off narcotics, in this case LSD, it doesn't mean the spirit god isn't getting enjoyment and fulfillment from torturing people using narcotics. This also means that these experiments have to be done over and over because the ecstasy from the narcotics will continuously wear off spiritually and also physically for the human. So Dionysus or Bacchus, the god of wine, vegetation, fertility, festivity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. So here's a depiction of it according to the Romans and Greeks. So it says Dionysus is the god of the grape harvest, winemaking, orchards, and fruit, vegetation, fertility, and sanity. Ritual madness, religious ecstasy, festivity, and theater in ancient Greek religion and myth. He is also known as Bacchus or Bacchus by the Greeks. This name was later adopted by the Romans. The frenzy that he induces is Bacchia, as Eleutherios, the liberator, his wine, music, and ecstatic dance free his followers from self-conscious fear and care and subvert the oppressive restraints of the powerful. His Thyrsus, a fennel stem scepter, sometimes wound with ivy and dripping with honey, is both a beneficent wand and a weapon used to destroy those who oppose his cult and the freedoms he represents. Those who partake of his mysteries are believed to become possessed and empowered by the god himself. This means that even today, people who partake in narcotics and alcoholic beverages are possessed spiritually by the narcotics god. Dionysian Mysteries. The Dionysian Mysteries were a ritual of ancient Greece and Rome which sometimes used intoxicants and other trance-inducing techniques like dance and music to remove inhibitions and social constraints, liberating the individual to return to a natural state. It also provided some liberation for men and women marginalized by Greek society, among who were slaves, outlaws, and non-citizens. In their final phase, the mysteries shifted their emphasis from a chthonic underworld orientation to a transcendental, mystical one, with Dionysus changing his nature accordingly. By its nature as a mystery religion reserved for the initiated, many aspects of the Dionysian cult remain unknown and were lost with the decline of Greco-Roman polytheism. Okay, so it says the role of wine. The original rite of Dionysus, as introduced into Greece, is associated with the wine cult, not unlike the entheogenic cults of ancient Central America, concerned with the grapevine's cultivation and an understanding of its life cycle, believed to have embodied the living god, and the fermentation of wine from its dismembered body associated with the god's essence in the underworld. Most importantly, however, the intoxicating and disinhibiting effects of wine were regarded as due to possession by the god's spirit. This is what we're talking about, and later as causing this possession. Wine was also poured on the earth and its growing vine, completing the cycle. The cult was not solely concerned with the vine itself, but also with the other components of wine. Wine includes other ingredients, herbal, floral, and resinous, adding to its quality, flavor, and medicinal properties. Scholars have suggested that given the low alcoholic content of early wine, its effects may have been due to an additional psychoactive ingredient in its sacramental form, supported by iconography showing herbs being mixed with the wine and the craters, especially preceding ecstatic behavior. Poppy, from which opium is extracted, is a likely candidate, being sometimes worn as a wreath by the god in art. So as you see here, this is the poppy plant, which opium is a narcotic. It is extracted from. Then you can see the poppy plant worn on Dionysus' head right here. So the poppy plant is here. So it says also honey and beeswax were often added to wine, introducing an even older drink, mead. Carolee Karenyi postulated that this wine lore superseded and partly absorbed earlier Neolithic mead lore involving bee swarms associated by the Greeks with Dionysus. Mead and beer with its cereal base were incorporated into the domain of Dionysus, perhaps through his identification with the Thracian corn deity Sabazius. Other plants believed to be viniculturally significant were also included in wine lore, such as ivy, thought to counteract drunkenness, thus the opposite of the grapevine, and seen as blooming in winter instead of summer. The fig, a purgative of toxins, and the pine, a wine preservative. The bull, from whose horn wine was drunk, and goat, whose flesh provided wineskins, and whose browsing pruned the vines, were also part of the cult, eventually seen as manifestations of Dionysus. So it says animals sacred to Dionysus. Dionysus has numerous sacred animals, such as the leopard or bull. Other sacred animals include the lions and other big cats, goats, donkeys, and serpents. Bulls. Dionysus' association with bulls is found in multiple epithets. In the Bacchae, Penthus, who opposed his worship in the god's origin city of Thebes, saw horns upon Dionysus' head as he started to go mad. I wanted to focus on the goat and serpent currently from the spiritual perspective. So let's look at the introduction to the Nature and Nature Book 2 for further explanation. So, listen to reason. The foregoing spirit gods and goddesses are the real chief categories of spirit beings who do rule the orb localities of the universes by programming the persons, places, and things thereof and controlling them in coordination and unity with the brain newts, gods, and goddesses by way of brain newts, brains, and reason. In the bottom half of the smart circle of order, most spirit gods and goddesses are represented by various animal forms, such as the sun god is represented by the eagle and serpent, among other symbols like the sun disk. The earth god is represented by the crocodile and serpent, among other signs like the cross, which is the astronomical symbol of the planet Earth. The moon god is represented by the monkey and serpent, among other emblems like the caduceus. The underworld god is represented by the dog and serpent, among other fetishes like the skull. And the serpent god is represented by the goat and serpents of all the other gods plus his own, as well as other charms like the phallus and yoni. And the writer might add that it is fact that the sea god is represented by the horse and serpent, as well as other talismans like the trident, which indeed is the so-called devil's pitchfork. Let it be remembered always so. This means that Dionysus fits under the serpent god chief category, because it is represented by the goat and the serpent. It also says that the serpent god is represented by the phallus and yoni. If we go into the Greek story of Persimnus, there is a connection between Dionysus and the phallus. Persimnus, also known as Polymnus and Hippolytus, was in Greek mythology a shepherd living near the reputedly bottomless Elysionian lake, hazardous to swimmers, which lay in the Argolid on the coast of the Gulf of Argos near the prehistoric site of Lerna. When the wine god Dionysus went to Hades to rescue his mother Semele, Persimnus guided him to the entrance by rowing him to the middle of the lake. The reward demanded by Persimnus for this service was the right to make love to Dionysus. However, when Dionysus returned to Earth by a different route, he found that Persimnus had meanwhile died. Dionysus kept his promise by carving a piece of fig wood into the shape of a phallus and used it to ritually fulfill his promise to Persimnus while seated on his tomb. This, it is said, was given as an explanation of the presence of a fig wood phallus among the secret objects revealed in the course of the Dionysian mysteries. There is also a temple that honors Dionysus in the Greek island of Delos that has a phallus as its representation. So here is, as we can see here, this is the phallus. This is part of it. So I guess the top part probably came off through time. So here's a better view. There's one here, and there's also another here. And right here it says something, then it says Chapelle de Dionysos. So it's probably the chapel of Dionysus. It's called the Stoibadion, or Stoibadion, is a temple to Dionysus located on the Greek island of Delos. Even though there are no charms or statues, etc., that represent the yoni, we must take into account that, that represents the yoni in accordance to Dionysus. There is no charms or statues, but we must take into account that narcotics and alcohol enhance sexual desires in men who have a phallus and women who have a yoni. And excuse any typos. So it says, however, the scope of MK Ultra does not, however, stop. Experiments involving violent electroshocks, physical and mental torture, and abuse were used in a systematic manner on many subjects, including children. Monarch programming. Monarch slaves are mainly used by organizations to carry out operations using patsies trained to perform specific tasks, who do not question orders, who do not remember their actions, and if discovered, who automatically commit suicide. They are the perfect scapegoats for high-profile assassinations, the ideal candidates for prostitution, slavery, and private movie productions. They are also the perfect puppet performers for the entertainment industry. programmers cause intense trauma to subjects through the use of electroshock, torture, abuse, and mind games in order to force them to dissociate from reality, a natural response in some people when they are faced with unbearable pain. The subject's ability to dissociate is a major requirement, and it is apparently most readily found in children that come from families with multiple generations of abuse. Mental dissociation enables the handlers to create walled-off personas in the subject's psyche, which can then be programmed and triggered at will. Just a reminder, the psyche is the spirit being, and spirit beings get full credit and respect as being programmers and controllers of persons and things in nature for their own purposes and benefits, and people's whenever and wherever people's interests coincide with theirs. So stay tuned, we're going to stop here, stay tuned for part 3, True Mental Cosmic Peace in War Times.